Who are the 5 players that we think are going to explode under Thomas Frank next year? Hopefully they don't actually explode. That wouldn't be very good. But we are going to have a bit of a squad audit in this video where me, Seb and Kish from Lilywhite Lab go through, look at all the players in the squad and put into a tier list who we think might be the top 5 players who we are going to be most excited about under Frank next season. Frank has got a very, very good track record at improving players at Brentford, especially improving attackers. And I felt there's a lot of gems in this Tottenham squad who we're going to see a lot more from this season compared to last season. Let me just explain as well. On this tier list, we have got 5 different categories. We've got the top 5 players that we are going to whittle down and decide collectively that we are most excited about seeing improving under Frank next year. We've then got the category down from that, which is players that we are excited to see but don't quite make it into that top 5. We've got a category called nothing to prove, which is kind of going to just be reserved for some players in the squad that we know will just do well regardless of the system. They are good enough, they are proven, they're experienced enough. And then we've got players that are in the danger zone that are at risk of either not potentially working in Frank's system or there is no real room for them in the squad. And then we've just got a category as well that we're just going to sell. You know, there's no real need to kind of either speak about them. We feel like they're going to be moving on. Their future's not at Tottenham. Let's get into it then. Where do we want to start? Do we want to start up front? Do we want to start in midfield? Do we want to start centre half? Kish, you pick a position and we'll go through them.
Start at the back. Centre back.
Start at the back. Let's start at the back then. So with Romero and Van de Ven, Kish, would you kind of just say straight off the bat that these guys would be? Have you got any worries about them at all, or do you just feel like it's going to be?
Yeah, I think they're straight into nothing to prove. I think them, obviously, with them as fitness issues are the main concern.
Yeah, there's nothing to prove in their game.
No, in terms of their game, I think they're really nicely complemented for any manager because Romero is the sort of aggressor and Van de Ven's much more passive and sweeps up. And I think that partnership is just like always going to work regardless of system. I think the only real concern I have is them at times defending more deep. I don't think we've seen them together defending their box. Although obviously in the Europa League latter stages they were pretty strong there. But they're the only real concerns I have. But yeah, I think that they're the 2 that are just guaranteed starters, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Out of the defenders then, Seb, on the defenders that might be on the periphery. Obviously, Kevin Danso's been signed on a permanent deal. Yeah. Danso's got that good blend of a defender with good heart, body on the line kind of stuff. Yeah. We saw that in the Europa League final coming on to move from a back 4 to back 3. Again, that's something, that fluidity of system and that ability to interchange from game to game and also in-game is something that we're excited to see under Frank and actually might suit some of these defensive profiles quite well. Obviously, then you've got Radu Dragusin as well, who's coming back from that injury. Me and Seb actually did do a keep or sell, in which we said we'd probably keep Dragusin around because we don't really know the timeline of his injury. But actually, Dragusin, again, might be another one that under Frank's system, a little bit more settled at the back. Again, his bread and butter is being that box defender to be able to head things away, which kind of made it a confusing signing at the time. But actually, under this manager, might work a little bit better. We've also got Ashley Phillips, who I don't know where that quote actually came from yesterday that was going around on Twitter that apparently Frank is quite a big fan of him and is excited to see him. And then obviously we've got Ben Davis, who it's a little bit up in the air at the moment what's going to happen, whether he's just renewed to get some money or whether he's going to stick around. And then, of course, we've got Luka Vuskovic as well. So if there was a couple of players maybe you could pick out there, that because what we will do is we'll put all of the players that we're excited about into this tier, and then at the end of the video, we'll then move everybody up, the 5 players that we want to move up into that top kind of category. So that if there was any defenders that you are excited about seeing under Frank that you'd want to put into that second category, who would you want to speak about?
I think Kevin Danso for me would definitely be that main one. I think it's difficult to get really, really excited about a centre-half who is probably just going to be a depth option next season with Romero and Van de Ven. But I think the thing is, if Romero does pick up an injury, which his track record would say he'll probably miss a couple of months next season, I don't think I've felt confidence in a backup centre-half for Spurs like I do in Kevin Danso for a while. Yeah. And I think we've seen glimpses, we've seen flashes, like when he came on in the Europa League final, when he started games after he came through the door in January, that as a defender, he's really exciting. His physical profile, I think he's brave on the ball. I think, you know, he doesn't have the ability that somebody like a Romero has on the ball, but what he does have is the willingness to drive forward with the ball, to play those passes that somebody of his technical ability might sometimes not have the bravery to make. And that's something I really like about Dan. So he's got a great mentality. And I think, like you said, if we switch to a back 3, if Romero's injured, even if Mickey Van de Ven's injured, he's somebody that I'm so confident in stepping in and filling into that role. I've also said before in videos that if Romero is to leave Tottenham this summer, I don't don't think we should just rely on Danso, and I think we'd 100% have to go out and sign that first choice defender. But whoever we do sign, I think Danso would push them all the way for that starting spot, and I think Danso will get lots of minutes in the Premier League next season, no matter what. Yeah, I think he's really, really exciting. I think on Vuskovic as well, he's the obvious one to point to and to go, he's super exciting, 18 years old, coming in. He looks like a freakish talent in that area. I think next season we won't see loads from him unless there is maybe a big injury crisis at the back or something like that. I think Thomas Frank will be quite wary with him. Maybe it's one of those where we keep him for 6 months, he gets loaned out in January. I personally would like to keep him at the club the whole time. I don't think he's the kind of player who is going to go on loads of loans whilst he's young. I think he's that kind of talent where it's just, he will just eventually break into the first team. And I think if Romero goes, you'll see more from Vuskovic. But if we have Romero, Van der Ven, Danso there, and Ben Davies as well, if he renews, and potentially another signing in that left side of defence, I think you'll see quite limited minutes from Vuskovic. But he's obviously one to get massively excited about for the future. But Kevin Danso for me is the one where I'm really excited to see how Frank profiles him and what he can sort of do with him in his game.
Right, so Seb, where would you put off that? Would you put Danso into excited to see? Would you feel like he's pushing on that maybe top 5, or do you feel like he's just a good steady Eddie in the team next year?
I genuinely think he'd be pushing on that top 5 for me, but I think I'd put him top of excited to see. I think he's one of those where I think it's tough to get that excited about him when Romero, Van der Ven are there, potentially another signing in that defence as well. I don't think Kevin Danso is going to step in, play 38 games in the Prem and be like an unbelievable centre-half for us, you know what I mean? I'm just excited to see what he can do, and I'm more just excited in the security of the cover that he gives us. So yeah, excited to see for me, 100%.
Kish, if you kind of go through the rest of those centre-back options then, is there anybody else that you're kind of, who do you feel like might be in the danger zone out of the rest of them? Obviously, we've got Dragusin, Davis, Phillips, obviously Vuskovic as well to talk about.
I think I'd put Davies, Phillips, both in danger zone, potentially sell. I don't think they will, and I don't think we necessarily should sell Dragusin yet, just because his value's probably so low right now. Yeah,
I'm kind of excited to see Dragusin a little bit, just in a system with more structure that is actually more suited to the way that he wants
I agree.
to play. As a squad option, I think he's fine.
Set pieces as well is a massive thing under Frank, and I think he's probably our best box sort of defender, probably best header of the ball, I'd say, if I can. Yeah, I'm missing someone, but yeah.
No, I think Dragusin and Vuskovic will be quite up there for that. When you think about how he's turned Nathan Collins into that monster in the air, right up there for aerial duels, won last season.
Again, you'll need that support for him and build up. He needs simple passing options constantly.
Yep.
But yeah, apart from that, I think defensively, I think Frank will like him. And then Vuskovic, obviously, I think everyone's excited to see, regardless of manager or system. I think he's just a top talent. So
I think for pre-season, he is the player that I've got my eyes on the most.
100%.
Especially with probably maybe, obviously we still don't know quite what's going on with Romero yet. Even though I think he'll stay. I think he'll give quite a lot of these players quite a lot of game time and opportunities to sort of prove themselves. We're going to need to rely on that big squad next year. I don't think they'll look to loan Vuskovic out again. I think they feel like they've probably got another Bergvall-esque talent on their hands in terms of someone, obviously different position, but someone that can step up and look ready at that level. I think he's definitely proven that at Westerlo this season, and obviously made his debut through the Croatian national team in the international break just gone as well. He, for me, obviously we'll come to it near the end of the video, he's right on my top 5, like Vuskovic personally, but we'll kind of come to it and make a decision. And then any other defenders? I feel like we've gone through them. I feel like Ben Davis for me should just go down to sell. Like I just don't think there's any need to have him in the squad. Like again, to be fair, like it's not the end of the world if he stays, because you don't have to register him in the Champions League, but we're going to have those issues of balance. And I feel like if you do have someone in that wants to take a punt on a player with a lot of experience who can offer something maybe lower end of the Prem or top end of the Championship potentially, I think we should look to cash in if that opportunity arises.
Get him to Wrexham.
Whereas Phillips, I think, is just because of although I think Frank might like him and I think his skill set might be suited to the way that Frank wants to build up and the way he wants to defend, I feel like just with the players ahead of him in the pecking order, I feel like he's going to be in that danger zone.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the goalkeepers while we're at the back. Obviously we've got, I mean, on the tier list, we've got Austin and Keeley, and I mean, obviously I'm going to chuck Forster into gone quickly because he's still on here, and Whiteman's obviously gone as well, so they're just going to go into sell. So it kind of leaves us with I haven't got them on here, but I've got them on the tier list. We've got obviously Keeley and Austin to talk about on top of Vicario and Kinski, but I feel like it's definitely going to be Vicario and Kinski where the focus is. So how much, Kish, I know you were going to talk about it in a video on your TikTok. How much do you see them potentially battling it out for that number one place next year? Or do you feel like there's going to be still a bit of a hierarchy between Vicario and Kinski?
I think Frank will want to come in and keep some consistency and some sort of continuity in terms of having those kind of big personalities in the team and not wanting to upset too much when he first comes in. So I think that for that reason, I think Vicario is a guaranteed starter. Also for the fact that I think goalkeeping wise, shot stopping, handling, Vicario is superior to Kinski. I think in terms of like actual type of goalkeeper, Frank will prefer Kinski. I think long term, I'd probably see Kinski really pushing Vicario, even mid-season, but most likely next season, because of the way that Frank wants his keepers to be able to play those chipped, like medium range passes and at times long passes as well, being really comfortable in drawing the press with the ball at the feet of the keeper and then kind of springing attacks with longer passes. And I think Kinski is amazing at that. So I'm excited to see Kinski under Frank, but I think Vicario will be the number one. And I don't think I don't think there's much to be discussed really in terms of who will start, but I think it's interesting debate.
Yeah, Seb, I'll come to you in a second on where we place Vicario, because it's quite an interesting one with the sort of categories. But I think with Vicario, like you said, or with Kinski, in terms of his range of distribution, like you said, Frank with that kind of double pivot in midfield, likes to play deep, likes to draw on the press, likes to bait the press, but quite often what we saw with Flecken was that ability to bypass the press by launching it into Visser and then playing off of him and you taking all those players out of the game. Or with the midfield profiles, they were quite happy to knit it through the thirds as well and move up that way. So I think that variance in the way that Frank likes to build up and be pragmatic at times while also being brave really suits a goalkeeper like Kinski's skill set, like you said there. But with Vicario, obviously, I think it's difficult to say like excited to see because I just rate him as a goalie. I don't think he's in the danger zone, but I also think he probably has got a little bit to prove. I think like in terms of just ironing out a few creases in his game, a little bit erratic at times as well, and sometimes with the ball at his feet doesn't look the most composed, but I think he's more than fine for what Frank will want to do. Where would you put him, Seb, if you could choose in this list?
I think I'd have him in nothing to prove. I'd like you say, he doesn't have nothing to prove, but I feel like it's just about the consistency in his game. I think we saw it pre-injury. I think that was probably the best, and the couple of weeks after he came back from injury as well. I think that's the best I've seen Vicario in a Spurs shirt. And I think that, he's an elite shot stopper. I think he really is. I think there's other areas in his game that he probably just does need to iron out a few inconsistencies. And I think even with if we're, defending our box a little bit deeper, sometimes under Thomas Frank, I do think that he'll have to really improve in that way consistently. But I think we all know the goalkeeper that Vicario is and can be, and I think he'll have nothing to prove in terms of being the number one next season, which I think I'd have him in there rather than excited to see, because there's not really too much to get excited about with Vicario is there for next year. So I think I'd have him in there.
All agreed on that? I think, I'm with you. I don't think he has got nothing to prove, but I think just in terms of, I think, like you said, Kish, in terms of keeping that core of the team together, especially with the leadership that Vicario does bring. And again, we might be not in the market, it's the wrong word, but like looking for a new captain as well. And I think Vicario was promoted to the leadership group last season, because I remember at the parade, and went through Maddison, Romero and Son, and then name-checked Vicario in that as well. And we were kind of led to believe it was those three, but I think Vicario is firmly in that. So I'd agree with that placement here. And then, Kinski, excited to see. I think with goalkeepers like Josh Keeley and Brandon Austin, we can put them kind of in the danger zone, even though I don't think... In terms
of next season and being first team, I think... Yeah.
There's also, for some of these players, like for the context of the video, that like they haven't really got anything to worry about, but they're just not going to be in the frame for first team football. So although it might not necessarily suit them, like that's the best place to put them, I think, in this scenario. So let's move on then we'll come back to fullback actually. We'll move further up the pitch and talk about what I think is going to be a really important area for Spurs next season, and that is central midfield, because we've just done a video on Seb's channel where we ranked all of the Tottenham transfer rumours for this season, and we spoke quite at length about the need to bring in a deep line playmaker or potentially someone that can break up play and destroy. Obviously, that's kind of almost whatever signing Spurs make might be off the back of a ripple effect of certain players potentially leaving the club, etc., in terms of what profile we target. So let's go on to talk about central midfield. Kish, you can lead the way in terms of maybe picking out a couple of players that you think are in trouble and a couple of players that you think really might thrive under Frank next season.
I think people will say that Bissouma's a guaranteed sell and Bentancur's a guaranteed keep. I think Frank will judge them and sell one of them. I think it's much more likely to be Bentancur to stay. I think there's talk of him signing a new contract, but I wouldn't be completely surprised if Frank likes Bissouma.
Yeah.
I do think it will be Bissouma to go, but it's not as kind of cut and dry as I think people would say. So I would probably look at, you don't want to, I think long term, we want to move on from probably both of them, but I think you need some sort of experience and leadership in that double pivot. And I think actually Bentancur will really shine in a double pivot.
Yeah.
Especially in an intense sort of system that Frank plays. I think Bentancur covering ground, being able to press high, being really energetic, kind of all action type player. I think that really suits him rather than him being like just a sitter who kind of has to be more responsible for sort of controlling space and stuff. So I'd put Bentancur in, probably excited to see, and I'd probably put Bissouma in sell. In terms of the other three, I think for me Bergval's nothing to prove. I think Bergval slots into the. I think he slots into the first 11 immediately, and is just the main midfielder we build around. Personally,
100%.
And I think he's only going to get better and better. And I want us to build the midfield around him because he's got that star level potential, and he's already so good. He was voted our best player last season, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And he's just he's only going to get better. That was his first season in a sort of really competitive league, and
crazy the step up and improvement that he made throughout the season as well.
Yeah, and he doesn't really, for me, have much weakness in his game as a midfielder. So, and I think Frank will really like how flexible he is and how he can operate in kind of deep areas, but also high up as well. I think that will be Sarr, I'm actually gonna put in. For me, are we leaving top 5 or are we putting people in now?
No, I think we'll make a decision on top 5 at the end. Yeah. So we'll put everybody in contention in there, and then we'll kind of decide off the back of that.
Okay, so I think Sarr, I'm really excited to see. I think
me too.
His running power, his sort of ability to press, but also he's also more than comfortable in deep areas on the ball. I think Frank will really, really like him. Just for his energy and sort of ability to cover ground, especially in a team. I think Frank is going to really want us to press high, and I think that's going to be a lot of sort of the system built on. So I think Sarr is going to be pivotal, and I think he's also quite different from what we have. So I think that one's really exciting. And Gray it's interesting with Gray. I don't necessarily know where he fits, although I know I'm excited to see him and his growth. It's hard to know whether he's going to be seen as a midfielder next season, especially if they look to bring someone in. But he's the kind of player you want in the squad because he can sort of slot in anywhere. Yeah. But again, Frank's obviously tried to sign him before. He's got massive potential, and I'd probably have him and excited to see as well. I'm just not as sure about how he'll be deployed next season.
Do you think he needs to find a home? Like, do you think he needs to nail down one position, or do you think he's still fine?
I don't think yet, but I think at some point, I think
he's probably about a year away from that.
Yeah. I think right now all the first team experience he can get is like a blessing for him, I think.
Yeah.
But eventually he needs to have or at least like 2 main sort of roles that he's gonna put down kind of.
I'd agree with all of those. I think Bissouma, I think it's more than likely that Bissouma will be sold. I think Bergval is slot straight into that first choice midfield, regardless of kind of what setup. I think he's absolutely made perfect for a pivot. I think he offers you a kind of blend of everything you want out of one of those two or both of those kind of positions in the different roles. Someone who's maybe a bit more of a deep passer and also is great at intercepting the ball, nicking it back, but also someone who can make those runs off the ball a little bit further forward, which is actually where I think Sarr's going to thrive. Like the way that Frank quite often balanced that pivot last season with Norgard was almost a constant, but he also had Janelt coming in, or Yarmouk, who was often quite making those more adventurous runs into the box, those kind of late third man kind of runs a lot of the time as well. And I think Sarr's actually very good at that, very, very good, kind of getting in the box, scoring goals. You want those runs from midfield, and I'm quite excited to see, like, obviously we need to strengthen in midfield 100%, and off the basis that we sell Basuma, if we're going into midfield, going into next season while adding a player with Bentancur, Bergvall, Sarr and Gray, there's like 4 concrete midfield options. I think it's a really nice blend of different strengths and profiles in there, and almost like you could set up with Bentancur. I think a lot of people will probably see Bentancur and Bergvall as the first choice.
Yeah.
I think you could even have Sarr and Bergvall, or Gray and Bentancur, or Gray and Bergvall. There's a lot you can kind of mix and interchange there, and profiles that complement each other and suit the roles that they're probably going to be asked to do. I think, again, we don't fully know how Frank is going to set up a Tottenham. He kind of said that as much himself. He's got some ideas, but again, he's a pragmatist. He's going to look at the strengths and the weaknesses of the squad, how certain players complement each other. But I think one thing probably is certain is the formation. I think will probably be a 4-2-3-1, because looking and assessing the strengths and the weaknesses of the squad is kind of what we do in this video. It's abundantly clear that system suits Tottenham the best. It's just how the roles are defined within that setup. So I think midfield, I think that's pretty much bang on. Let's go to the number 10 position then. Obviously we've got Kulusevski we can talk about in this section as well. But I'll kind of let you kick off and lead on that, because Maddison, I think for me, is like, when you're thinking about how Damsgaard was profiled last season more as an out-and-out 10, I think that is where, if Frank does decide to kind of plug in and play the system from Brentford last year, or as close to it, maybe with a few tweaks here and there, Maddison is a player that really, really suits those Damsgaard-type responsibilities that he did have. But again, one thing that does get a little bit overlooked with Damsgaard is the work rate and the ground that he covered, which is where Kulusevski kind of comes back into the mix with the 10. So we've got Kulusevski out wide in terms of breaking down the squad, but feel free to chuck him into this conversation as well about those 3 players we could talk about for the 10.
Yeah, 100%. I think James Maddison is super exciting. I also think when you're talking about the 10, based off of all the transfer rumours we've heard so far, it looks like there could be a marquee signing in that sort of area. Look at somebody like a Berriese, which I think would be hugely exciting too. But just out of those options, James Maddison, if he's fit, will be the starter in that role. And I think, yeah, like you say, his role will probably be quite similar to that of Mikael Damsgaard. I think Thomas Frank will get him closer to goal. I think you'll see James Maddison's output in terms of his numbers, especially goal scoring wise, probably go up next season. There's obviously still those injury concerns for me there. And that's why I think there could be a signing in that area. You've also got Dejan Kulusevski as well. But I think it's been tough for Kulusevski to sort of really decide, because it feels like he personally wants to play in that role. He wants to be that number 10. He wants to play more inside the pitch. But in terms of the profiles we've got on the left-hand side, his quality still on the right-hand side. I think Kish has spoken about it quite a lot as well, in terms of Kulusevski right now in that squad is sort of quite unique in terms of our winger options. Somebody who can hold the ball, somebody who can bring other players into play, come inside the pitch a little bit more, as opposed to Tell, Johnson, on those winger positions, Sonny as well, who more inside forwards who like to sort of attack the box. But yeah, I think James Maddison, I think like you saw him dropping quite a lot deeper under Ange Postecoglou last year. I think, like you said, he'll play more in between the lines, picking up balls in areas where he can hurt the opposition more. Maybe if he's sort of a little bit more strict in that area, you might see his injury record maybe improve a little bit more if he has less sort of defensive output too, with a double pivot behind him. That could really help his game as well. But yeah, it's really, really exciting with James Maddison, and I feel like with forwards coming inside as well and fullbacks overlapping, I think you'll just see his game just go up and up and up under Thomas Frank. And
yeah,
it's going to be, yeah, he's definitely like near the top of exciting to see for me.
Yeah, he's going to have runners in front of him, isn't he, all the time? When you think about Tell, you think about Johnson making those darts beyond the forward. Obviously, I think one thing I loved about Maddison last year at times was his ability to get close and combine with Solanke and kind of play off him and use Solanke as a bit more of a backboard almost, to kind of fire balls into, then make that little movement around the midfielder to kind of pick the ball up in that sort of space off of Solanke. And again, with Solanke kind of dropping in, and again, I think we'll talk about Solanke shortly, but like Solanke's role in this system, potentially, if you're kind of looking at Visser, someone that will drop in and allow space for those other runners to get in behind, which brings Maddison into the game so much more as a kind of traditional number 10. And also making runs in beyond Solanke as well is something that we saw quite common with in Maddison's game last season, Bodo Glimt semi-final first leg.
I was just going to say that I think he's even spoke about the fact that he's tried to add that to his game. And I think Frank really likes that kind of that sort of game, that principle of like drawing players out and then exploiting the space
Yeah.
behind. Well, he does that both in build up, but also in the final third kind of areas. You know, he wants to constantly be using the space in behind defenders and trying to kind of draw them out so that that space is created. I think that dynamic between Solanke and Maddison will be really nice, because at times you'll have Solanke dropping into those 10 areas and Maddison going beyond him, and vice versa.
100%.
So it's a nice dynamic.
100%. Kish, what about Jamie Donnelly? What do you sort of see with him maybe next season? I think another loan might be good for him, but do you think maybe pre-season?
I think pre-season I would really like to see him get some minutes in the 10, especially with obviously Kulusevski being out. We don't know who and when that maybe potential marquee signing is going to happen. I think there's never been a time where a system is necessarily going to suit Donnelly more than it will under Frank. Just because of that natural 10 position, I think. And in terms of like creative output and what he'll want from that number 10, I think Donnelly's really got the capabilities of that. I think his passing is just unreal, and his sort of ball striking, his technique is just so good. I think there's some concerns around his mobility, but if you can kind of get him in those 10 areas consistently, I think he's someone who will rack up assists, goals, just from his ball striking, his vision. Yeah, he's a really, really nice player. Yeah, I think we just want to see him in a number 10 position in pre-season, really.
Yeah, agreed. Nothing to lose on him really either. He's not going to take up a space in the squad. I think if the right loan move comes in, 100%. Send him out, I think, just to get a bit more experience. Can make that step up to the Championship with maybe Ryan Mason, who knows him quite well, or any other Championship club. And I think also a Championship club that's kind of on the cusp of actually being able to potentially achieve something as well, because that's the kind of position he found himself in with Orient last year. And I think that step up from League One to the Championship isn't as big as the next step up that's obviously to come. And I think he can definitely go to the top of that league and kind of find a home somewhere. But I'm excited to see him. I think he will get given a chance. I think a lot of these loans for the youngsters, and let's try and rattle through some quickly now as well, because I've got some players here who aren't on the squad. Also, apologies, there are some players here that just won't be with us next season. I just spotted Timo Werner, but this was an old an old tier list.
Get that guy out of here, man.
Yeah, but obviously we've got the likes of Will Lancashire, who, you know, I'm again excited to see at Spurs maybe for the longer term, but I think he definitely needs another loan. So we'll maybe put him in the kind of danger zone. Dane Scarlett, I think, similar as well, but maybe out of the striker options that we've kind of got behind Solanke and Richarlison, I think Scarlett's probably more likely to actually potentially push for a squad place than someone like Lancashire.
Yeah, I think the only reason that one of those two will stay is squad registration reasons. I don't think they'll ever be second choice yet. Even if we don't sign a 9 to back up Solanke and Richarlison leaves, I think they'd probably more likely to use Tell as a 9 or something else. I think I think it's for them, it's about their careers and what they want.
Exactly, 100%. Which is why I think they're both going here, because I think they're going to be kind of competing against each other. And I think Valiz is definitely in that as well, but I'd probably lean towards just trying to get some money back for him, to be honest. Also realised I've got Jamie Donnelly in here twice. So good we rate him that highly, we're going to put him in twice. Also, let's quickly just rattle through a few other set. Like, these are players like Hill, Solomon, there's just no real place for, like, whatsoever, in my opinion. Obviously, Reguilon's already gone. And then, I think, obviously, with them, I think there's probably a good time to maybe move on to the wingers then, because I think Kulusevski is kind of a nice bridge between the two. Kish, where do you kind of see his main role potentially next season? How excited are you to see him under Thomas Frank? And do you feel like there's probably been a little bit too much? You made a video about it on your TikTok about him and Porro. I kind of spoke about it as well. I've had quite a few comments recently where I feel like people are almost just forgetting about him, or kind of just thinking that they're too single-minded in their approach of, this is exactly how Tottenham are going to play. Frank wants a right winger that's going to run in behind and finish like Mbeumo, when actually, again, as we've said so many times, he's going to be a manager that assesses the options in front of him and profiles those players correctly to get the best out of them. And I think he's going to look at a player like Kulusevski with the work rate, with the improving output from last season, with the IQ and the quality and the out of possession stuff as well. It's a no-brainer that he's going to be a big part of what Frank wants to do, right?
I think the people get confused and they think Frank made Mbeumo into this running in behind. Frank looked at Mbeumo and saw his abilities to run in behind and finish and shoot from those areas and thought, okay, this is how I'm going to set up my team. In the same way in Wissa, and when Tony was there, you know, he had a slightly different system because Tony was good at holding the ball up, and he gets the best out of his players with those capabilities. He's not going to come in to Spurs' squad and say, oh, this worked at Brentford, so I'm going to do the exact same thing here. That's not the kind of manager he is.
Yeah.
So he's going to look at, I think, Kulusevski, and people got caught up on the whole Kulusevski saying he wants to be a 10. I think Kulusevski wants to be in those 10 areas. It doesn't mean he has to be a pure 10 and wear that on his shirt and only be in central areas. I think he wants to operate in more narrow places, because I think that's where you get the best out of him, and under Ange being on the right wing never ever allowed for that. So I think having him on the right doesn't necessarily mean he's not gonna be optimized. I think obviously you need someone to hold the width up there, and that would be, you know, Spence, Porro, when Kulusevski's there to constantly overlap. But I think that would have a really nice dynamic of Kulusevski cutting into his left foot, being able to either reverse pass back to the kind of overlap or whip in across from the half space or get a shot off. I think he'll actually really enjoy that role a lot more, where the fullbacks are given the license to keep the width, whereas under Ange it was a lot of, you know, central responsibility on the fullback. So yeah, I think Kulusevski will be a major part. It's just about that injury and how quickly he gets over that.
Agreed. Yeah, rumours that apparently he's not going to be back till November. Certainly going to miss pre-season. But I think I'm definitely in the same camp as you, that he's a player that I'm really excited to see once he does get back up to full tilt, once he's fit, once he's got over that injury. And I think that there's just no way that Frank has a player like him on his hands and just decides, actually, he's not for me. He's not what I want. It's not like I said, we said this in the last video that we did together, like, we're not working under a manager now that requires, because they're so wedded to a system, they require kind of specialists for those kind of roles, because that's his way of playing. Whereas now, again, I'm going to say it till we're blue in the face about what Frank does and how he kind of works with his players and squads. Kulusevski is 100% going to be a massive part. Brennan Johnson, Seb, what are we saying about Brennan? Obviously, coming into this season off the back of a 25 goal contribution season this year, still a lot of doubts about maybe his ability to provide more of a refined all-round winger game and bring more to the team. It's about kind of what he does in those final third areas. He's more of a final action player. But again, like Kish touched on with Archie Gray earlier, this is a player that Brentford were willing to break their transfer record to sign a couple of years ago. And again, I think when you look at what Frank has done with certain attackers, being able to get them to land in the right spaces, refine their game, simplify their game to just score those goals. Which, to be fair to Ange, that's what he did with Brennan Johnson. Like, Ange deserves a lot of credit for that, obviously. But I think Frank is a manager personally that I feel like can build on that, take that to another level. And I'm personally quite excited about Johnson next year. I think there's definitely things that he needs to work on, but where do you see it?
Yeah, 100% agree. And I think under Ange, sort of explored the capabilities of Johnson, but I still don't even think he fully unlocked what Johnson could do in a Spurs shirt in terms of that role. And I think Thomas Frank could 100% do that. I don't see Johnson I've never seen Johnson as somebody who will start week in, week out for Spurs. But I think in certain games with the right profile on the left-hand side as well, I think you could see him explode under Thomas Frank and become such a key asset in our squad, like he was under Ange. You know, got plenty of 25 goals and assists, I think, bang on the nose last season, which is an incredibly impressive return for any winger, really. So, yeah, I think off the bench, even potentially through the middle as a 9 at times next season, you never know what he's got in store for him. I think Brennan Johnson has the qualities of a decent number 9 in the Premier League, and I think that could be something that happens next season, especially if we maybe sign somebody on that right-hand side too. And I think he's just going to be a player that Frank looks at and goes, I can get the best out of you again, like he will with so many of these players. And I think in terms of somebody who can run in behind, somebody who can get to the byline, create for others as well, potentially, you know, when he's getting in behind, cutting balls back. I think we saw that at times under Ange Postecoglou too. I think I remember him setting up a few goals for Richarlison in the 23-24 season. So those I think
first time crosses after being played in behind.
Yeah, I think I've been very hot and cold on Brennan Johnson throughout his entire time here, but I think with a less prominent role next season, potentially it's the one that he had under Ange last season, where it felt like when he was available, he pretty much started almost every game. I think we'll see maybe a bit of the pressure taken off of Johnson's shoulders, but maybe even more delivered from him. I think it's really exciting for him, defo.
Yeah, again, if you apply, like I said, we can't get too caught up on it, but if at times Brentford switch into a 5 at the back, a 5 kind of 3-2. I saw James Alcott said this in his video. When you look at Nottingham Forest from Brennan Johnson's first season in the Premier League, Johnson was quite often playing as that highest player, as that outlet, sitting in, soaking up pressure and making those runs in behind. And he was deadly. He was absolutely deadly kind of working in the front too as well. So that could work.
What I want to say as well was that I think you saw the good bits of Johnson under Ange, but you also saw the really bad bits when he was stuck out on the touchline, when he was coming deeper to receive the ball from Pedro Porro. I think some defensive work as well. I don't think Brennan Johnson excels like defensively. I think he was caught out quite a few times last season in that regard. And I think, yeah, like I said, Ange got a lot of good out of him, but also a lot of bad. And I think you'll hopefully see less of the bad under Thomas Frank. And I think he won't have Brennan Johnson playing stuck out wide on the touchline, having too much of an influence in build-up. Like I think Ange maybe wanted Johnson to do too much of last season. So yeah, I think you'll see more of the good.
I think that's a really good point, actually, because I do feel like as much as I've been quite vocal about how excited I am about Frank and why I definitely think it was the right decision to move on from Postecoglou. And look, with Ange, I think obviously we're internally kind of grateful for the legacy that he left behind of actually being able to win something at Spurs. But I saw someone made a point about this on a podcast the other day. And obviously it's easy to say this in hindsight because we won something in the end. But maybe he was the kind of manager that we needed, because I think we've learned a lot about this squad from playing under Postecoglou, about what certain players' strengths and weaknesses are and how to profile them correctly, which is, I think, is something he failed to do. But by his failure to do that with certain players, highlighting the good and the bad in some of these players, has actually made it easier for a manager like Frank, who is that is his main strength, to actually come in and straight away be able to work on those flaws, I think, in certain players' games, and then amplify their strengths as well. I think that's a point that definitely applies to Johnson.
You saw like the lowest of the lows, the real flaws with a lot of these players for a lot of last season, which is why we finished 17th in the Premier League, right? And obviously the injuries didn't help and stuff as well. But like you said, we've also, like, Van de Ven is probably the perfect example of it. Like, you've seen him like profile, like, at his absolute best in that system, doing what he's absolutely best at, sweeping up in behind, like stuff like that. So yeah, I think you're completely right. Frank will use a lot of the good and the bad of what Ange Postecoglou left behind, and sort of that will give him a great platform, I think, and a lot of these players. Yeah,
Kish, what are your thoughts on that? And also, let's move over to the left, and you feel free to take the lead.
While we move over to the left, I think just to add, I think I can see Johnson also getting some minutes on the left next season.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially with his timing of runs and Solanke's like tending to drop in. I think there'll be a really nice opportunity for that left winger to constantly be getting on the end of those runs, and obviously that angle suits a right footer, and Johnson on the right it'll be a bit more awkward for him to get those shots off when he's running behind. Not that he can't do it. I think he's also got that left foot sort of far corner decently.
His first time finishing coming in off the right into the centre of the box on his left foot is good, but he's not the sort of one that wants to shift it out of his feet and wrap it. Like, he's not.
And so that's why I think. But obviously we've got a lot of left wingers there. So I think if we rattle through them, I think Tell for me is the one I'm most excited about.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, I'd have him in excited to see, and Frank being able to improve forwards. I think Tell's ability to get shots off without even breaking his stride is insane. He's got a good physical profile. He's just such a natural forward, like in terms of the ability to shoot and finish and make things happen. I think it is also natural to him. He's only 20. I think he's the one that for me is going to come on them the most, I think. Audibert, I'm super excited to see where he actually gets deployed. I'm like more intrigued about Audibert. I really like Audibert. I think technically he's one of our best players in terms of technical ability. Like we've said, I think he needs more personality. He needs more. I think to be honest, I think he just needs more minutes. I think the more minutes he gets, the more settled he gets, he's going to get more and more confident. And every player is different. Some players take a while to kind of really believe that they like belong in a certain club, and he's one of those. He seems like a kind of reserved character. So yeah, but I think in terms of his ability to also be flexible, he can play both sides. He can play in the 10. I think Frank will really like that. He can also be a sort of touchline winger, but I think he can also operate in those more central areas. I think he's really flexible, and that will be a great player to have around. For me, Son, regardless of Frank, I think is just probably time to move on.
Yeah, definitely at least in the danger zone, I think, isn't he? Definitely.
Yeah. I think especially with the signing of Tell, that might be a kind of hint that Son's definitely off. It's not like we kind of waited to see what happened with Son. And
they exercised that buy option at the first possible opportunity, didn't they?
Yeah, and we've got Audibert there who prefers the left. We've got Tell now. And obviously we've got Moore, who I think probably should be sent out on loan next season. I think he's too good to not be playing first team football, but he's also not quite ready to play in our team. I think he could get a Prem loan, to be honest, but maybe a Championship loan. He's still so talented, and we just need to be very careful about where we send him on loan, so that he's guaranteed game after game after game.
Would you be opposed to say? I think we've spoke about this before, but like I'd really be open to him going abroad.
Yeah.
Well.
I think
somewhere that provide like a team that is solely kind of a team that wants to play attacking football, wants to play the right kind of football. Has got a lot of technical quality in the side. I think
we need to basically recreate what sort of we want to be doing with the loan. So if it's a team in the Championship, it needs to be a forward-thinking team, an aggressive team that he's going to need to press, for example, because we're going to want to press. I think that was something he kind of struggled with a bit. I think his intensity was a bit off, just because of the major step up to men's football. But I'm excited to see his like long-term future under Frank.
Yeah.
Same.
And also I'm excited to see him in pre-season as well. That's why he's definitely got to go there. And I think
and a lot of these
made after pre-season.
They'll have a chance to prove themselves. So there might be sort of switches there. And then obviously Yang will be going out on loan again, I imagine.
I agree. I'm going to put Yang in excited to see just again more for the long term. I don't think it's too harsh to put. Again, danger zone isn't just about players who are in trouble. Yang's certainly not in trouble. So I'd kind of put him. Be in favour of putting him there.
He did well at QPR as well. Like,
he did. I think that was a smart loan as well. Got him used to the country, got him used to kind of playing English football.
And London as well.
I was kind of worried when he first went out there, because I was like, shit, was that the right first loan for him? But I think QPR fans actually quite liked him, and he scored a couple of goals and did well. Seemed to actually develop quite quickly to the physical side of the league. I remember watching a few clips of his games, and he's bouncing off players and stuff. Like, he's doing well, I think. So he's definitely excited for pre-season.
Goals, I think.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
Let's move on to full. Before we let's end with the strikers. Let's move on to fullbacks. So I think this is an area that I'm really excited about. We've obviously got Doggy, Porro, Spence to kind of speak through here. Obviously, Spence can play on both sides. I've just put him in the right. But again, that's the beauty and the versatility of him. It still remains to be seen who's going to be that first choice pairing. I think Doggy has definitely got that left back spot nailed down. I personally still think it's going to be Porro, and I think Spence is such an amazing luxury to have as an option in the squad of someone who profiles differently to both of those two players. His ability to drive forward with the ball, his dual winning ability as well is going to be something that's absolutely massive under Frank in terms of a system and a manager that wants to be solid defensively, win those individual duels all over the pitch, kind of be able to, Frank's kind of spoke about before, creating that local supremacy in terms of getting players into areas, outnumbering the opposition. But the way you do that is by winning the ball back. And I think Spence is obviously going to be a big part of that. But I think Kish, like with Porro, obviously you made a video about Kulusevski and Porro about the half space cross. Thomas Frank has been so vocal in the past about getting numbers into the box, whether that is your striker, whether that's players like Yanal or Yarmouk making those runs from deep. Obviously, the wingers coming in to attack those back post areas as well with Mbeumo and Sharda. Obviously, when he had Tony before, a bit more of a target man. And I think when you look at Tottenham's best crossers, you are looking at Kulusevski, but you're also looking at Pedro Porro, who's just cash money from those kind of more central positions. Although his crossing from out wide is very good as well. How excited are you about Pedro Porro under Frank next year?
Yeah, I think he'll really like his ability to both operate on the touchline and also operate in the more central space. I think that will create a really nice dynamic.
Yeah. I think we can all agree all three are going and excited to see, right? None of them are in any danger whatsoever.
I think Porro's ability to create from, especially how Frank, I think, will know that we're going to face a lot more low to mid blocks. I think Porro's ability to break a mid block as well is really nice. Like his timing and weight of those passes that he clips over the down the line often. Not many players in the squad can do that. It's such a small margin to allow, the defensive line's not super high and they obviously want to play offside, and I think Porro's timing there is really good, and we saw that in a couple of the Europa League games. So I think Porro will be loved by Frank. I think Udogie, I think the physical profile is just at an elite level. And I think we really saw the best of him towards the end of last season again. His ability to get up and down that flank.
Also his durability as well, like most minutes over the 2 seasons under Postecoglou in a very demanding system as well. And this is going to take a little bit probably less physical responsibility on his part as well, this system. His
Udogie's ability to also operate both out wide and in the central spaces is great. Yep. I think that both of them are really flexible there. And then Spence's ability to carry the ball and break kind of blocks in that way, and really take players out of the game by just his comfortability and his athletic profile is really exciting too. So I think all three are really exciting. For me, I'd probably go Doggy, the most excited, just because I really like the dynamic of potentially Tell and Udogie, and Udogie kind of keeping the width and being up and down that flank and kind of controlling that whole flank. Because I think he's got that capability of really like owning a whole touchline. I think that's a certain thing I look for in a fullback. Like, can they dominate the fullback both in their third and the attacking third and the middle third? And I think that will give Tell more freedom to kind of operate in more striker-like positions. So I'd probably say I'm most
covering them at the
excited
back as well.
Yeah, and then Van der Ven covering those spaces is really nice. Yeah.
100%. Sorry, when I was talking about durability, I was talking about Porro. Not, I just clarify. Yeah, sorry, I didn't. Yeah, but obviously, a Doggy coming back from those injuries last season, I think we definitely, like you said at the end there, kind of seeing him back towards his best. I'm really excited about all three of them, to be honest. I think having those options, I don't think there's many teams in the Premier League. I know this is the thing about, like, there's a handful of players in there aside from the obvious. Like, we've obviously got a lot of players in Cell, but I think those ones are obvious, and there's a few players that were just in this tier list before that I just needed to move into there. We've got a few players in the danger zone, but again, there's caveats to kind of those. Most of these players are kind of going in excited to see, and I think when me and Seb did the keep or sell, there was only, like, again, kind of the real obvious ones that you would go to sell, and it just goes to show how good and talented this squad actually is. I don't think there's many teams that can compete with those fullback options that Tottenham have got in terms of pure variety as well, and the ability to cope physically with the Premier League as well, on and off the ball. So yeah, I'm super excited. Let's end with Solanke and Richarlison then. I think Richarlison, I just think that's probably, I think we could probably all agree that he's definitely at least in the danger zone, 100% actively should be looking to sell. And then Solanke, Seb, how do you feel about Dom next season? Obviously, Frank name-checked Solanke in his interview that he did with Spurs last week when he joined, saying, I want to make him score a lot of goals, which is, I think that is the only criticism you can have of Solanke really last year. It was that proficiency and his proficiency kind of in and around the box, his ability to, or his lack of ability to kind of get shots off or get in the right positions to kind of get on the end of chances. So much good work in kind of the build-up phase. It was just when it comes to that final third, that final action, he either wasn't there or the finish maybe wasn't convincing, or if he was making chances for himself, just not quite being able to shift out of his feet. Again, a lot of football last season, a lot of physical responsibility, kind of broke down, got that injury around January, and never really came back the same sort of player that we saw in the first half of the season. But I think there's so much encouragement from what we saw in the first half of the season that we can take into this year, and Frank can build on that. So how do you feel about Dom?
Yeah, 100% agree. I love Solanke. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how Frank wants to use him next year, because you can't ignore like what he can give you and build up, and sort of that's his biggest strength in his game. So I do definitely think you'll see him dropping a little bit deeper, combining with somebody like Maddison running in beyond him. I think you saw that a lot with Damsgaard this season. Like, you saw Damsgaard popping up a lot in and around the penalty area, and Visser dropping a little bit deeper. But also you saw Visser sort of in and around the area. You know, they're not exactly the same kind of striker, of course, but I think there were the signs there with Solanke, like, you know, his goal against Chelsea, I remember at home, was like a lovely flick on from across. Like, I think the signs are there, and I do feel like if Thomas Frank can really sort of get that mentality there with Dominic Solanke, like a more ruthless mentality when he is in and around the area, I do definitely think you're going to see him score more goals under Frank, I think, anyway, naturally, than under Postecoglou. Like, we're going to have more games where we dominate, create more chances. And I think you'll naturally see that output improve with Solanke anyway. I think he'll be our number one penalty taker as well. There won't be Son there. Maybe Matisse Tell might be a penalty taker as well. But I do think you'll definitely see Solanke as that main guy there. But yeah, I think it's more exciting what he brings other players, what he brings a Matisse Tell, a James Maddison, a Brendan Johnson off the right-hand side. And I think you'll probably see a lot of similar things to what you saw under Ange Postecoglou there last season in terms of dropping deeper, bringing players in the build-up, but maybe just to a better extent, because everything around him will be more structured, and, you know, the players around him will be better profiled as well. So I think he's hugely exciting. I do think, like we discussed in the video on my channel, I'd like to see a profile brought in that's more reliable than Richarlison, that is of a different profile to Dominic Solanke. So in those games, maybe against a deeper block where you do want somebody in the box who is going to be more efficient in getting shots off, or maybe in sort of somebody who will run in behind a bit more. But I do think Solanke, runs the channels really well as well off the ball. I just think, he's hugely exciting. If you get the right profile in to sort of back him up and somebody's going to be more available for more of the season, I think that will only improve Solanke's game too. Playing slightly less minutes, help those injuries that he had last season, because he's actually a very durable player. And I think Dom Solanke is, again, one of those players who just is going to be really, really exciting to see how. I think it's not more what we're going to see from him, because I think we've already seen so much from him, but more what level Frank can take him to in terms of his game and sort of how good he can be, because I still feel like that's what we're really waiting to see with Solanke is, okay, we know what he can offer us, but how good actually can he be over the next couple of years for Tottenham Hotspur, because we signed him for a lot of money, and I think a lot of people want to see him reach a higher level, definitely.
Yeah, 100%. Right, I think the time's come. Kish, I'm going to let you go with your 5. If you could pick 5 players that you are most excited about, and then we'll kind of all come together. Seb, you go next, and we'll kind of all come together to agree on a 5 near the end. So if you could go through 5 that you're really excited about.
I'm going to go Tel.
Yep.
Sarr.
Yep.
Kulusevski long term, but obviously he's injured right now.
Mm-hmm.
Udogie.
There he is.
Maybe Maddison.
Yeah, I like that. It was Tel kind of at your... obviously, you said Tel first. Is Tel
that's probably my order as well, I would say. The thing is with Maddison, obviously, I just know what a good player he is. So obviously, the margin of improvement isn't as big as what I think it will be with some of the other guys.
Yeah, but again, those small margins, those small improvements can make such a massive difference.
It's not gonna change a lot of people's minds as much as I think the other people will.
It's not a scary jump. Yeah, I agree.
And I think Tel, Sarr, even Kulusevski towards the end of last season, and Udogie over the course of the season have so much more to give. I really rate them as players.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why I'm so excited to see what he can kind of how high of a level can he get them to, how much improvement can they show, kind of thing.
Sure. Seb, is there, if you can make, are there any changes in your list?
Yeah, mine was basically the same. Tel and Sarr were my top 2 as well. I think I'm so big on Sarr, and I've been banging on about him this season whilst his stocks have kind of been low. I think some people have written him off in a lot of ways and forgotten how young he is and how good he can be. But I just think Tel making that left wing spot his own next season is going to be so exciting. I was tempted by Alderweireld as well and Danso. I actually put Porro in over Kulusevski. For me personally, I'd have kind of had Kulusevski in the nothing to prove category. I just, like, the level you saw him at for the first 6 months of last season, like, I don't know how a player can really get much better than that.
Yeah.
Like, he was so good. And I think that's the level you'll see him return to under Frank rather than see him really improving. But I think it might be a slightly different role coming in off the right-hand side. So I absolutely hear that as well. I just think Pedro Porro, I think he was really, really good in the last few months of the season last season. I think he was quite poor for the first 6 months of last season. I think, he was exposed quite a lot. And I think if you see him in a more settled system, sort of with a more, a pivot in front of him, less exposed to 2v1 situations like he constantly was under Ange Postecoglou on the right-hand side, and being allowed to focus more on the attacking side of his game, I think you'll see his numbers explode next season. I think you'll see him in those really creative roles. I think by the end of next season, we'll be talking about him as one of the best right-backs in the league, which I don't think we've seen him.
And I think there's a real window for him to be that now. With Trent out the league and Livramento is that I think he could become 100% in that conversation for
Definitely. Sure. I'd still have Udogie over him, personally. I think Udogie is the third most exciting player for me, because I just think, again, I think he could be solidified as best left-back in the league, one of the best left-backs in the league. I think that, it's bold statements to say, for a team that's just finished 17th, etc. People are going to have an issue with that, but I genuinely think that's how good those two could potentially be.
Yeah.
And I'd stick James Maddison in there as well, just because I think people are less almost convinced on Maddison than Kulusevski, weirdly. Yeah. Even though I think us three are more maybe convinced on Maddison than Kulusevski next year under Frank. I just think James Maddison, again, is one of those players who still receives so much criticism for maybe consistency. And I do think there were moments, especially in the first season when he came back from injury, that, were quite unconvincing games where he was drifting in and out of it too often. And I do believe that in the areas that you'll see him operating in under Frank, that will be slightly more exciting than the areas you saw him in under Postecoglou, which is where I think those small margins can really make the big difference with James Maddison.
I think with Maddison, where we at times where we did see him in and around the box last season, he's just so good at creating
good
something
100%.
Every single time. Like
that assist.
Yeah, you
Sorry,
can have him, but you can
carry on.
have him like down a dark, like an alley that you think he's not going to get out of, and then he just chops once, chops twice, and then gets a really good cross off, really good shot off, and just getting him closer to goal with that ability to, you know how he does that sort of chop onto his left foot or chop back onto his right foot,
Yeah.
work a yard to get those high quality shots off. I think just him in and around those areas, I think it's going to be amazing to see.
Agreed.
That assist for Spence at Ipswich away is everything that you will. That is like you can't get the ball off him when he's in that sort of position. Like the feet are ridiculous. I'd personally in that 5 have Kulusevski in the nothing to prove, just because I just feel like he's so good. He'll find a way under Frank. Which
I'd probably agree with that.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'd probably agree with that. But also, like the thing is, it's like Bergvall would probably be like the top of this for everyone. But again, I just feel like he's a bit like Kulusevski, where it's like he's already done it and already shown that.
Yeah.
Whereas Maddison is obviously still a little bit more doubt, because also I think Maddison is in here rather than nothing to prove, even though I rate him that highly to be in the nothing to prove category, just because we're going to likely to sign another player in that position. So I feel like I'm excited to see how that pushes him on as well. Was there any other changes, Seb, or was that your final 5 as well?
I think that was my final 5. I was tempted by Spence as well, just I think he's still the best one-on-one defender we've got out of all of our fullbacks in the squad. I think in those bigger games that will have more eyes on them outside of Tottenham, I think you might see Spence have a big role to play in those games. Like, say we go away to Anfield against Mo Salah, like if Jed Spence has proved that he can play those top wingers in the league and just absolutely do a job on them, like keep them so quiet. So I do feel
Frank
like
rotated Coyote and Van den Berg quite a fair bit.
You'll see Spence play loads of football next season, 100%. And we'll be naive if we think Porro and Udogie won't pick up injuries at certain points too. So even though Porro's been so available for the last couple of years, but you can see that catch up to players in big ways too. So you never know if Porro has a big injury next season or something. So 100%.
Nice. The 3 players that I was kind of very close to chucking in here, the one that I kind of wanted to put forward, and I would have maybe put him in instead of Udogie, would be Solanke. I think I'm just so excited to see how his game goes up another level next year. Another one was Johnson. Like I'm excited to see how he can kind of fine tune Johnson even more, just to become even more of a weapon. But I think Johnson for me would just probably be close to here. Again, Gray is another one, but I'm not sure he's quite breaking into that top 5 right now. I think if I could make one change for me, I think I'd go Solanke instead of Udogie. But I'm also quite comfortable with.
See, I'd have Porro. I'd have Porro out of that top 5 way quicker than
I think Porro for me. I'd have Porro over Udogie, but I think then again there's nothing in it with those top 5. Really.
I feel like with Porro and like with Johnson, I feel like we've seen a lot of what the good is going to be. It's just about like bumping that up. Whereas I think with Udogie, I think you'll see. I don't know. I still feel like there's so much untapped potential in Udogie, especially going forward. And I feel like we haven't really seen him fully excelling in that role. I feel like end of last season, definitely, to be fair.
And start of Ange as well. I think he was so good, man.
Yeah, 100%. I hear Solanke though. Like, I think Solanke could. I think you'll see him in a much more prominent role in front of goal next year. 100%. Yeah. I think Frank will want to improve that.
Well, let us know in the comments the most liked comment. If you guys all put your top 5 in, the most liked comment will officially be the top 5 players that we are most excited to see, or you guys are most excited to see at Spurs next season. I think we're in agreement on a lot of those. There's a few that are just pushing it for us, and I think Johnson, Solanke would be those kind of 2 for me. Guys, thanks so much. Kish, where can people find you? You're definitely posting a lot more now, aren't you, on TikTok?
Yes, on TikTok it's Lilywhite Lab at Lilywhite Lab, but I also post more general football content at kish.100, and then obviously on Twitter, I'm sure a lot of you have already come across my page. It's Lilywhite Lab. Follow both of those.
Sweet. Links will be in the description. Make sure to go and follow Kish on TikTok, especially trying to grow those pages. And Seb, where can everybody find you, mate?
Seb on Football, Seb on Spurs over on TikTok. Obviously, check out the FC Bottle Job podcast, mine and Ben's podcast. That's 2 podcasts a week. Getting lots of new exciting guests on there as well. Kish making his first appearance tomorrow potentially. So go and check out all of that content. And nice one for having me on, mate.
Nice. Thanks guys for watching. Make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.